Okay, we got another budget card from Soyo, and this one's the RX 470 for the Chinese market. We're going to test this card's performance, thermals, and run some gaming benchmark and see how this card goes. In a nutshell, this card's... Anyway, let's just unbox this thing.
Before we proceed with performance testings, let's look at the design of this card. The Soyo or Mougol RX 470D has a single fan design, a small metal heatsink, one HDMI, one DisplayPort and one DVI output, and then it uses a 6-pin power connector. No backplate, just a cheap plastic shroud, basic. If we compare the RX 470D to the original RX 470 and even the refreshed RX 570, it's got the same 4GB VRAM, 256-bit bus, but this is a cut down model having only 1792 shader units, and hence why it was limited to the Chinese market. We ordered our RX 470D from AliExpress for $54, and we were supposed to get a Mougol card, but somehow we ended up with a Soyo card. For performance testing, we placed this card on our Ryzen 5800 X3D rig, which is probably not the typical processors for buyers of this card, but we're trying to showcase the maximum potential here in case you're on a budget AM4 platform. For thermals, we tested the Soyo RX 470D on its default settings and run Warzone to determine thermal performance. Ambient is about 14 degrees, it's a bit chilly here at winter, and it was pretty bad. We ended up with about 79 degrees maxing out the card, and we didn't even reach the 120 watts power for this card. We eventually ended up thermal throttling and was having a pretty bad experience. You can see how its clock speeds were going up and down here, and I was noticing it as the screen just started being really choppy. This card doesn't have an RPM sensor, so the only way you'll know how fast the fan is going is through the percentage, but you won't know how fast it is in terms of RPM. Stock settings isn't recommended on this card, which means we'll have to do some tweaks. Okay, this is how we initially tuned this card. We placed a fan curve and undervolted it by tweaking some power figures. I subtracted about 30 millivolts on the peak. After doing so, it began to be a bit stable in terms of thermals. So, in Warzone with competitive settings, lower textures and low shadows, it was okay. You can play on this one at about 80 FPS with FSR 3. Obviously, it's not the best, however, it's playable. Thermals was okay, and our GPU power is around 65 watts throughout the gameplay, peaking at 73 watts, which isn't bad at all. Moving into Fortnite, and here we run all three modes. The only option here is performance mode if you want more FPS. For performance mode, it's okay. Definitely not the best as well, but we were able to push more than 200 FPS here without thermal throttling. GPU power goes all the way up to 85 watts now, but usually hovers around 80 watts. The lows are not bad. We're able to hit those shots here, and yeah, this is fine. Totally fine, boys. In Helldivers 2, well, performance isn't very good on medium native 1080p, and also because we don't have a lot of VRAM, so we had to tune this down to low with performance upscaling before it became playable. On the ground with Helldive difficulty, well, we can definitely fight those bugs here and there. The only problem is visibility. And this is because we are on the performance upscaling. It's so hard to see if we are able to hit those weak spots of those terminated bugs. And view distance is a problem as well, because we don't know if there are a lot of bugs because it becomes pixelated. But yeah, it's playable. Max temperatures at 70 degrees, max power 73 watts. And before we proceed, if you like contents like this, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Okay, let's move on to the next game. Valorant seemed okay too. It's a lightweight game and we're definitely maxing out our GPU here. FPS is not as high as our usual, but you can still hit about 270 FPS. The temperatures are not that bad. We're below 70 degrees, so that's good. That's good. We're able to hit those shots. So if you're on a budget, this is a decent card if you're just playing Valorant. In Apex Legends, this is where we run into thermal issues. So even with our tweak power settings, it was still thermal throttling. We had to drop the power settings again, undervolting it to 807 millivolts, the peak one, before it started becoming stable. We're able to play this game at lower settings. Yeah, it wasn't that good, and I'm guessing we were probably thermal throttling here because this is a DX11 game. DX11 games tend to put a lot of load on the GPU, hence why we were experiencing that initially. Moving on to PUBG, another game which is a DX11 title, and this throws a lot of load on the GPU. This experience, however, was pretty hopeless. Even though we have updated our power settings, we were still thermal throttling. So yeah, this one's unplayable. When that happens, it'll take a while, but eventually you will run into those thermal issues, which can be really annoying, especially when it happens on the final circles. Here's a performance comparison of the SOYO RX 470D against a modern graphics card like the RTX 4060. Let's start with a less demanding game, which is Valorant DX11. Moving on to a heavier DX11 title, PUBG. So this is before we got into thermal throttling. And finally, we have the DX12 game, Helldivers 2. And do take note that the RTX 4060 is almost 6 times the price of this card. So take that into consideration. The SOYO or Mougol RX 470D is such a bad card. It suffers from thermal issues, especially on graphically intensive DX11 titles like PUBG, although it tends to be better on DX12 games once it's been tweaked. I tried to reach out to the seller and advise them of the issue, and the Mougol official store has stated that I just need to bring it to a repair shop. So yeah, there's my $54 gone. If this video has helped you with your purchasing decision, hitting that like button would be really appreciated. And if you're interested in another SOYO card, I have a video of their RX 5700 XT right here. That one was actually much better than this one. At least that actually sustained its performance. Alright, click that one and I'll see you guys over there.